My son swore I was too much, too frail, too ugly for his perfect wedding day. His fiancée? She threatened to have me committed. They never knew I was dying, sure, but I was also sitting on a fortune they couldn't even dream of. On the day they tried to erase me, I smiled for their cameras one last time, then I took everything back. This is how it truly happened. I'd picked out my favorite blouse, a soft lavender with tiny pearl buttons, the same ones little Billy used to trace with his baby fingers. I even put on the pearl earrings he'd given me for my 65th birthday, the very ones he'd picked out himself, beaming. Looking in the mirror, I tried to see what they would see. All I really saw was an old woman, wrapped in a scarf, fighting to look less like a ghost. But I smiled anyway. I held on to a sliver of hope, a fragile thought that maybe, just maybe, this would be one of those days we'd all laugh about later. Perhaps I'd say something silly, and Billy would roll his eyes playfully, and Chelsea would offer a polite, reserved smile. Maybe they'd let me help, fold a napkin, or taste a dollop of cake frosting. I was still his mother, after all. That had to count for something. He walked in without bothering to knock, a gust of expensive cologne and overconfidence. Billy, now nearing 30 and a rising star in his firm, barely glanced at the homemade chocolate chip cookies I'd baked or the chamomile tea I'd brewed, the same loose-leaf blend he used to beg for when he was just a boy. He simply perched on the edge of my antique couch, looking as if he had far more important places to be. I was standing when he said it, yet the words still felt like a physical blow, knocking the breath right out of me. "Mom, I think it's better if you don't come to the wedding." He said it so casually, as if he were doing me a kindness, sparing me some grand inconvenience. My hand hovered over the untouched teacup, cool porcelain against my shaking fingers. "What do you mean, darling?" I managed, though a cold dread had already begun to settle deep in my stomach. "It's just," he started, adjusting his tie, "it's a very curated event, you know? A very modern, clean aesthetic. Minimalist." Chelsea and I, we agreed. We want the guest list to reflect that. I let out a small, bewildered laugh. "You don't want your own mother in your wedding photos, Billy?" He shifted, visibly uncomfortable. "It's not just about photos, Mom. It's about the whole presentation. You've been unwell. The scarf, the cough. It might make some guests feel awkward." My heart, already fragile, seemed to crack, a faint, painful sound. "So, I'd be a distraction?" "Mom," he said, and the word felt like a formal title, devoid of warmth. "You know we love you. It's just, Chelsea has a very specific vision. A certain look she wants for the day. A certain experience." He didn't get to finish. Chelsea herself swept in, without knocking, a tall, slender woman with a face sculpted like it belonged on a magazine cover. She didn't even acknowledge me, her gaze sweeping around my cozy living room as if she'd detected an unpleasant odor. "So, this is the place," she declared, her voice flat. "Cozy. Very vintage." "Chelsea, this is my mother," Billy said, a forced pleasantry in his tone. She gave a curt nod, her eyes still avoiding mine. "Nice to meet you." I stood there in my own home, feeling like an unwelcome intruder. "I would truly love to be there," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I can sit in the very back. I don't need any attention. I want to see my son get married." Finally, she looked at me, and her eyes were colder than any winter morning. "We've already finalized the seating chart and the dress code, I'm sure you understand. It's all about the vibe." I looked at Billy, pleading silently for him to intervene, to defend me. He remained silent. "She's sick, Billy," Chelsea pressed on, as if I weren't even in the room. "I mean, you're sick. It's admirable that you're trying, but the whole scarf and pale skin, it's going to make people uncomfortable." Billy chimed in, "We can send you the photos, Mom. We'll even FaceTime you in for the ceremony. It'll be just like you're there." My voice was barely audible. "I don't want to FaceTime it, darling. I want to be in the room." Chelsea offered a smile, but it was devoid of warmth, a predatory glint in her eyes. Perhaps we can talk after the honeymoon about some long-term care? Somewhere clean, peaceful. A good place for recovery. My heart sank. She means a nursing home, I stated, the words heavy in the air. Mom, don't make this harder than it has to be, Billy sighed, his gaze drifting away. I'm trying to be respectful. I looked at him then, truly looked at him. The same bright blue eyes I'd rocked to sleep countless nights. The same strong jawline I used to kiss before he ran off to school. Where had that boy gone? I gave you everything, I whispered, a desperate plea. Everything I had. He sighed, standing up. And I appreciate that, Mom, but you can't keep guilt-tripping me forever. That's when he uttered the words that would forever echo in my memory, a poisoned arrow straight to my heart. This is why Dad left you. Something inside me went completely still, an icy calm replacing the ache. He'd weaponized it, a truth he'd held onto, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, and it landed precisely where he intended. I didn't respond. I just sank slowly onto the couch, my hands trembling on my knees. The tea was still warm, untouched. So were the cookies. Chelsea turned towards the door, a dismissive wave of her hand. We'll be in touch. Let us know how your treatments go. Billy leaned down, pressing a quick, dry kiss to the top of my scarf. It felt like someone patting a tombstone. We love you, Mom. We really do. Then they left. Just like that. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply stood, walked to the window, and watched their expensive car pull away, disappearing down the street. Then, into the quiet, empty room, I whispered, "Thank you for showing me who you really are." I reached for the scarf, tightening it gently. It wasn't about hiding shame anymore. It was about holding myself together. Something deep within me had shifted. A plan was forming. And Billy? He was about to learn, one way or another, what happens when a mother who gave absolutely everything has absolutely nothing left to lose. Not anger, not bitterness, but a chilling, resolute clarity. That night, I didn't shed a single tear. I didn't scream or curse at the heavens or beg for answers. I just sat in the profound silence of my living room, enveloped in the soft, worn flannel robe I'd owned since Billy was in high school, my thin hands folded neatly in my lap. The lights were still on, casting a dim glow, but the house felt darker, as if the shadows themselves were listening to my every shallow, raspy breath, a harsh reminder of the chemo's relentless grip. I didn't care. My gaze remained fixed on the street light blinking above the quiet road, its familiar hum a stark contrast to the tumult in my heart. I remembered simpler days, when that very same light would illuminate the front steps, signaling Billy's return from school, his backpack bouncing with youthful energy, always hungry, always full of stories. Now, it was just me. Just me, and the crushing weight of every word he'd spoken. You'll ruin the photos. You'll make everyone uncomfortable. This is why Dad left you. That last one, it was a venomous sting, burrowing deepest. I knew the truth about Michael. He'd left because he was a coward, pure and simple, not because of anything I'd ever done. He hadn't wanted to be a father. He hadn't wanted the burden of working 2 jobs, hadn't wanted to love a woman who carried the stretch marks and bone-deep exhaustion of motherhood like battle scars. I'd never told Billy the full truth, not really. I'd always painted his father as tired, not absent, as broken, not cruel. I'd let Billy cling to the belief that, perhaps, Michael had loved him, just a little, once. It felt like the least I could do, preserving a fragment of an illusion. Now, Billy had grown into a handsome man, successful in his own right, yes, but also cold and cruel, just like the father he never truly knew. I rose slowly from my worn recliner, my joints protesting, stiff from the cold seeping through the old house and the relentless grip of the chemo. Every shuffled step echoed through the quiet rooms, a haunting reminder that no one else was there. My bedroom was meticulously neat, the bed crisply made, my old Bible still open on the nightstand where I'd left it that morning. I walked to my closet, kneeling with a grunt of effort before an old, metal filing cabinet tucked away on the bottom shelf. Inside, nestled beneath years of tax returns and faded birth certificates, was a single folder, labeled simply in stark black ink, "Final." I pulled it out, carried it to the bed, and opened it with a deliberate slowness. Inside were neatly clipped pages, my will, my life insurance policies, the deeds to 3 rental properties, and bank statements with balances that would astonish even me. I'd never lived extravagantly. I still clipped coupons for groceries, still trimmed my own toenails, still wore church shoes from 1997, scuffed and familiar. But I had money. A quiet fortune, built penny by painstaking penny over the decades. I remembered the first property I bought, a rundown duplex right across the street. The neighbor, an elderly widow, had passed away, and her family wanted nothing to do with the burden. I'd just received a small inheritance from my great-aunt Rose, a sum I'd carefully guarded, and I used it to place a bid. I rented it out, fixed it up bit by bit, and suddenly, there was extra money every month. So I bought another. Then a third. Then a stake in the local beauty salon when my dear church friend, Sheila, needed help getting her business off the ground. No one knew. Not even Billy. It was meant to be a surprise. That had been the plan. I'd imagined the day, quiet and respectful, when my lawyer, Marilyn, would hand Billy a sealed letter. Inside, it would read, "You always thought I had nothing, but I saved this for you. I wanted you to know that I believed in your future." That day, I knew with a chilling certainty, would never come now. I picked up the will, staring at the elegant signature at the bottom, Eleanor Grace Hayes. Right above it, Billy's name, my only child, my sole beneficiary. I reached over to my nightstand, pulling out the gold letter opener Billy had given me in college. It had my initials, EGH, engraved in tiny, intricate cursive at its base. I used it to tear the will in half. Then in quarters. Then in eighths. A strange lightness filled me, as if the air itself had returned to the room, crisp and clean. The very next morning, I called Marilyn Chambers, my oldest friend and my lawyer. We'd known each other since we were fresh-faced 19-year-olds, singing off-key in the church choir, convinced our lives would be far simpler than they turned out to be. Marilyn answered on the second ring, her voice still thick with sleep. "Ellie," she mumbled. "You all right?" "No," I said, a new, steely resolve in my voice. "But I will be. Can you come by this afternoon? I need to rewrite my will." There was a brief pause. Then, Marilyn's voice, sharper now, "Is this about Billy? He stopped by yesterday." I figured. Saw the wedding announcement. No mention of you. I didn't let her finish. "He asked me not to come, said I'd ruin the aesthetic." Marilyn remained silent. "And Chelsea," I added, my voice hardening, "she told me I was a liability. That I should be sent to a home." Billy just stood there. Another silence stretched between us. "Bring the new documents," I commanded. "I already know who I want to leave it to." "Are you sure about this, Ellie?" she asked gently. "I'm dying, Marilyn," I replied, the words a raw, honest truth. "But not today. Today, I'm just taking back what's mine." Marilyn exhaled slowly. "I'll bring everything." I hung up the phone and walked to the kitchen, a quiet determination settling deep within me. I brewed a fresh pot of tea, carefully buttered a slice of toast, and sat at the table with a yellow legal pad. I began to write a new letter. Not to Billy, but to my new beneficiary, the Hope Haven Foundation, a women's shelter in Savannah that specifically cares for elderly women abandoned by their families. I'd volunteered there in my younger years, painting walls, serving hot meals, even sitting for hours reading the Bible to residents too weary to read on their own. They were me, now. Women no one visited. Women no one remembered. Women people wanted to simply put away, out of sight, so they wouldn't ruin the view. I finished my toast, the crumbs a testament to the hunger in my soul, and began drafting my final instructions. The house would go to the foundation. The rental homes would be sold, and the proceeds donated. The salon would remain open, thriving under Sheila's capable hand. The bank accounts would be transferred within 30 days of my passing. No funeral. No obituary with a glossy photo. Just a final, stark letter, printed and signed, addressed to Billy Hayes. I raised you better than this. I loved you more than life itself, and you threw me away for a woman who couldn't even look me in the eye. So now, you get nothing. I won't bury my money beside someone who buried me while I was still alive. Goodbye. I set the pen down, the ink still wet, and looked out the window again. The street light was off now, the morning sun pushing defiantly past the clouds, painting the sky in soft hues of rose and gold. A new day. A new will. A new ending. This time, I would be the one to write it. Marilyn Chambers arrived just after noon, a sleek black briefcase in one hand, 2 overflowing folders in the other. She didn't knock. She knew better. I'd always hated being treated like a client. We'd been friends since we were young women, both wearing pressed choir robes, sneaking peppermints during Easter rehearsal. We'd shared secrets in hushed whispers, cried at each other's parents' funerals, and aged together like ancient oak and sturdy stone, solid, weathered, and unshakable. When I opened the door, my scarf tied like a queen's crown, my movements slower than usual, Marilyn said nothing. She simply stepped inside, placed the briefcase on my dining table, and met my gaze with an understanding that transcended words. I brewed tea, I offered, my voice a little rough. But it's cold now. Doesn't matter, she replied, her voice firm. We've got work to do. I sat down at the table, sliding the yellow legal pad toward her, the one where I'd meticulously drafted my instructions the night before. My handwriting was shaky in places, the pen trailing off during moments when my strength had faltered, but the message was undeniably clear. Marilyn read it carefully, her brow furrowed in concentration. Then, she pulled out a fresh set of blank documents, began a new will from scratch, and started writing. I watched her for a long moment before finally speaking. Did I ever tell you why I started saving money? Marilyn didn't look up, her pen scratching across the legal paper. You said you wanted to make sure Billy never went without. That was part of it, I admitted, a soft sigh escaping my lips. But it was more than that. I watched too many women die broke. Women who worked just as hard as I did. Women who gave their lives to ungrateful husbands, unappreciative children, and jobs that paid them dust. I told myself I'd never go out like that. You won't, Ellie, Marilyn said, scribbling something at the bottom of a form, her voice imbued with a quiet power. You're going out loud. I managed a weak smile. Out loud indeed. I was going to surprise him, I confessed, the old plan resurfacing like a phantom limb. Leave him everything. Even the letters. I had one written for every birthday until he turned 50, all sitting in a shoebox. Marilyn paused, her pen hovering over the page. What are you going to do with them now? I'll burn them, I stated, my voice steady, resolute. He doesn't get those anymore. He doesn't get me. We worked in silence for the next hour, a symphony of rustling paper and scratching pens. I provided account numbers, property addresses, the name of my banker at Citizens Trust, and the title to the beauty salon I co-owned with Sheila Turner. I even had a thick envelope of cash tucked inside my sewing drawer, $10,000 in crisp bills, wrapped in rubber bands and meticulously labeled, emergency, in case the world ends. Marilyn meticulously listed every asset, every dollar, every possession worth naming. At the top of the new will, I dictated the name of the sole beneficiary, the Hope Haven Foundation. Marilyn raised an eyebrow, a hint of curiosity in her gaze. You're sure you want to give them everything? They've never asked me to hide who I am, I explained, the words feeling right, true. They don't care what I look like. They don't treat old women like we're forgotten furniture. You don't want to leave anything at all to Billy? Marilyn asked gently, her voice soft, probing. I stared out the window, the curtains drawn, yet the sunlight still streamed in, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I left him my whole life, I said. That's enough. Marilyn nodded, a silent acknowledgement of a profound truth, and continued writing. By the time we were finished, my hand was trembling from the sheer effort of signing. Marilyn slid the new will in front of me, and I pressed the pen to the paper, my signature no longer elegant, but undeniably mine, and irrevocably final. I also wrote a letter, I added, once the last document was signed, to him. To explain why. You want me to give it to him? Marilyn asked. Not yet, I instructed. Let him have his wedding. Let him smile in his tuxedo and show off his new bride. Let him think he's won. Marilyn glanced at me, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. And then? Then you give him the envelope. Right in front of everyone, Ellie. You really want to make a scene? I'm not making a scene, I corrected, my voice quiet but firm. I'm ending one. He started it the day he told me I was too ugly to be seen. Marilyn nodded solemnly. We sat together for a while longer, the legal documents neatly packed back into her briefcase, the sealed envelope resting on the table between us. My breathing was shallow again, my skin pale, almost translucent beneath the kitchen lights. But there was a fire in my eyes, a fierce spark that hadn't been there in years. You think I'm being cruel? I asked softly, the question hanging in the quiet air. Marilyn reached across the table and placed her hand over mine, her touch warm and reassuring. No, she said. I think you're being honest. And I think he's lucky you didn't do worse. I chuckled, a dry, raspy sound. Don't tempt me. We both laughed then, a sound that felt like old times, like Sunday potlucks and pressed choir robes, like a joy that still had a place in my aching lungs. But underneath it, there was something heavier, something permanent, the profound truth of a woman who had given everything, and now had absolutely nothing left to lose. As Marilyn stood to leave, I handed her the manila envelope, marked boldly with Billy's name. Hold on to this, I instructed. And promise me one thing. What's that? She asked, her gaze steady. Don't let him cry and change your mind. You hand it to him exactly when I said. Marilyn nodded, a silent vow passing between us. I promise. I walked her to the door, slower now, one hand on the wall for balance. I watched her drive off, then locked the door behind her. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. I turned off the lights and shuffled back to my bedroom, where the shoebox of birthday letters sat beneath my bed. One by one, I carried them to the kitchen. Then, with a chilling deliberation, I fed each letter into the trash can, tearing them in half before they disappeared, the one for his 30th birthday, his future wedding anniversary, the one that began, if you're ever feeling lost, remember that you were always my son before anything else. Gone. By the time I was done, my hands smelled of ash and ink, but my heart felt strangely clean. I walked to the sink, washed my hands slowly, and looked at my reflection in the window. The scarf was still wrapped around my head. My skin was tired, my bones visible beneath my robe. But my eyes, those were alive. I'm not done yet, I told myself. And when I'm done, the whole world will know my name. The invitation arrived in a thick, cream-colored envelope, embossed with elegant gold lettering, just 4 days before the wedding. I found it nestled in my mailbox, tucked between a coupon catalog and a letter from my oncologist. I knew instantly it wasn't from Billy. The return address belonged to someone else entirely, cousin Eleanor, from Florida, the kind of distant relative who always managed to show up at every family gathering, armed with a saccharine smile, a plate of overly sweet pastries, and a whisper brimming with juicy gossip. I stood on my porch, my fingers trembling slightly from the medication, and opened the envelope with meticulous care. Inside was a folded card, adorned with ornate cursive calligraphy and a glossy photo of Billy and Chelsea on the cover. They stood beneath a white archway, she in a long, fitted gown that shimmered like moonlight, he in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his arm draped casually around her slender waist. Their smiles were wide, brilliant, and utterly perfect. I studied the photo for a long moment, as if searching for a tiny crack in their flawless facade, a flicker of doubt. I found none. I opened the card. The ceremony, it read, had been moved to a breathtaking vineyard on the outskirts of Charleston. Outdoors, surrounded by thousands of white roses, an expanse of curated elegance. Beneath the address, in smaller, almost apologetic font, was a note: "We'd love for you to join us and celebrate this special day. Quietly, of course. Please sit in the designated family section and respect the couple's wishes. With love, Eleanor." I chuckled, a soft, dry sound. Of course. I could almost picture Billy reluctantly agreeing to send that invite, a begrudging gesture, a bone tossed towards lingering guilt. Or perhaps it was all Chelsea's idea, a cynical move to appear gracious without ever having to utter a single apology. Regardless, the message was crystal clear: I was allowed to attend, as long as I remained completely invisible. I folded the card carefully, placing it on my kitchen counter. I didn't need to deliberate. I would go. Not for them. For myself. On the morning of the wedding, I rose before dawn. The house was still, bathed in the pre-dawn hush, the sun not yet having dared to peek over the horizon. I bathed slowly, methodically, my hands lingering over my skin as if to memorize what fragile strength remained. I dressed in a soft gray suit, the one I reserved for Easter Sundays, and wrapped my head in a deep blue scarf, lined with delicate silver stitching. I pinned on the small silver dove brooch my mother had given me at graduation, worn but still shining with a quiet dignity. My reflection in the mirror made me pause. My body seemed smaller, more fragile than I remembered, but my eyes, those were still firm, still fiercely me. And today, I had work to do. Marilyn arrived right on time, dressed impeccably in a navy pantsuit and sensible low heels. She carried the manila envelope in her briefcase, sealed and boldly marked with Billy's name. I handed her a small, black purse containing a few tissues, a bottle of water, and a second, smaller envelope. "That one's for Chelsea," I said, my voice unwavering. "Give it to her after." Marilyn looked at me, a question in her gaze. "Are you sure you're up for this, Ellie?" I nodded, a resolute tremor running through my frame. "I want to see it. Just once. I want to see how far he thinks he's come." We rode in silence, the car humming softly as the sprawling vineyard appeared in the distance, a breathtaking tableau of green and white. The property was stunning. Rows of verdant vines stretched into the rolling hills, guests in pastel gowns and champagne-colored suits milled about beneath white tents adorned with twinkling string lights. A small quartet played soft jazz near the grand entrance. I sat in the car for a moment, taking it all in, imprinting the scene in my mind. "He spared no expense," Marilyn muttered, her voice barely a whisper. "Not with my money," I whispered back, a bitter truth on my tongue. We stepped out together, Marilyn's steady hand guiding me as we walked towards the designated seating area. A few guests glanced our way, polite nods exchanged, but no one truly recognized me. No one knew the frail woman in the scarf and soft gray suit was the very reason this lavish wedding could even exist. I settled into the third row, quiet, just as requested. From my vantage point, I could see the altar, the sea of guests, and the small platform where the couple would soon exchange their vows. I took a slow sip from my water bottle and waited. The ceremony began a few minutes later. Billy walked down the aisle, looking sharp, polished, and bursting with pride, a true American success story. Chelsea followed, stunning in a fitted gown that shimmered and sparkled in the sunlight, drawing gasps of admiration from the crowd. I didn't. My eyes stayed fixed on Billy, unwavering. He didn't look my way. The officiant began the service, his voice resonating with words about unity, about trust, about honoring the people who helped raise you. I watched Billy closely. He shifted once, a barely perceptible movement, at the mention of parents, but he didn't look back. The vows were long, filled with flowery promises. Chelsea cried during hers, tears of joy glistening on her cheeks. Billy smiled, charming, charismatic as ever, a perfect groom. They exchanged rings, kissed gently, and turned to the audience, husband and wife. Applause erupted, a thunderous roar. Cameras flashed. People rose to their feet, cheering. I remained seated, a quiet, immovable presence. Marilyn leaned over, a questioning look in her eyes. "Now?" she whispered. "Not yet," I whispered back, my voice barely audible. The couple began their triumphant walk down the aisle, hand in hand, pausing to pose for pictures, laughing with friends, Chelsea kissing Billy's cheek, and he pulling her in with a grand flourish. I sat still, my hands resting calmly in my lap, my breath slow and shallow, a deceptive calm. The reception tent opened, a wave of guests beginning to flow towards it, eager for the celebration. I turned to Marilyn and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Marilyn stood, removed the manila envelope from her bag, and walked directly towards the couple as they posed, radiant, in front of the floral arch. Chelsea saw her coming, her smile faltering, replaced by a flicker of confusion. Billy turned, his triumphant grin dissolving when he recognized Marilyn. "Congratulations," Marilyn said evenly, her voice cutting through the celebratory chatter. "This is for you. From your mother." She handed the large envelope to Billy, then turned and presented the second, smaller one to Chelsea. Before either of them could utter a single word, Marilyn walked away, rejoining me, her eyes meeting mine. "Done," she said quietly. I stood slowly, gripping the ornate handle of my cane. From across the manicured lawn, Billy opened the envelope. His expression changed almost immediately, a rapid shift from confusion to disbelief, then to utter, stark panic. He flipped through the pages inside, the new will, the letter, the stark proof of donation. He looked up, his gaze sweeping the crowd, finally locking onto mine across the sun-drenched vineyard. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I simply turned and walked slowly back towards the waiting car. Let him smile for the camera. Let him have this one, perfect day. Because everything after it? It would belong to me. Billy stood frozen, the manila envelope trembling violently in his hands. Around him, guests continued clapping, laughing, raising toasts, oblivious. A photographer adjusted his lens for another round of smiling shots. But Billy didn't move. His face, normally so self-assured, had gone pale beneath his warm, tan skin. The veins in his temple pulsed, a frantic rhythm. His lips were slightly parted, as if the words on the page had punched the air right out of his lungs. Chelsea, impatient, peered over his shoulder. "What is it? Why is she here again? What is this?" She snatched the second envelope Marilyn had given her, tearing it open with a frustrated rip. Inside was a single, handwritten note, penned in my own shaky script on ivory stationery. It read, "Chelsea, I won't make this about insults. I won't relive the moment you looked me in the eye and threatened to put me away like yesterday's trash. But I will tell you this, if you're marrying Billy for what you think you're getting, I suggest you find a new dress and a new life. He has nothing now. He earned it. Eleanor Hayes." Chelsea's jaw dropped, her perfectly made-up face contorting in a mixture of disbelief and fury. "What the hell does that mean?" Billy didn't answer. He was still flipping through the legal documents Marilyn had enclosed, pages of neatly formatted text, signed, stamped, and terrifyingly official. The will was chillingly clear. Every single asset I owned, my properties, my bank accounts, my shares in Sheila's beauty salon, had been left to the Hope Haven Foundation. Nothing for him. Not a dime. No trust fund. No house. Not even the pearls he'd given me as a child. The final page was a personal letter, my last message to my only son, "Billy, you were born from love. You were raised with sacrifice. I scrubbed hospital floors so you could have a future. I wore shoes until the soles peeled off. I said no to things I desperately needed so you could say yes to everything you wanted. And when I got sick, I still wanted to leave you everything. Even though you hadn't called in weeks, even though you never once came with me to treatment, I still wanted you to have the fruits of my labor. Then you opened your mouth and told me I was too ugly to be seen at your wedding. And that's when I realized, I didn't fail as a mother. You failed as a son. So now, I leave you nothing but your name. I hope you build something with it. Goodbye." He read it once. Then again. Each time, his hands shook more violently. The perfect, polished smile he had worn like a mask since childhood cracked in two, shattering his composure. A murmur spread through the guests, a ripple of unease. The pianist, sensing the shift, stopped playing. Someone whispered, "What's happening?" Chelsea turned to him, panic rising in her voice, sharp and cutting. "Is this real? Tell me this isn't real, Billy. This is a joke, right?" He looked at her, his face ashen, devoid of color. "She left me nothing." Chelsea stared at him, her beautiful eyes wide, as if he'd just told her he was utterly bankrupt. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, searching for words. "She gave away everything? You told me she was dying. You said she is dying." Billy snapped, "Exactly. So what were you waiting for? A hug?" Chelsea hissed, her voice low and furious. "You let her take everything because you couldn't fake respect for 3 hours?" He didn't answer. Chelsea's eyes darted across the venue. People were watching now. Too many of them. Phones were out, glinting. Whispers were turning into pointed fingers. She took a step back from him, recoiling as if he were diseased. "I am not marrying a broke man who can't even control his own mother." The words hit harder than any slap. Billy tried to grab her hand. "Chelsea, please. This doesn't change us. We can still." She yanked her hand away. "You embarrassed me. You let her humiliate me. I didn't know she was sitting right there." Chelsea snapped, her voice rising, pointing vaguely toward the third row. "You let her come to the wedding." The guests fell into full, stunned silence. The reception tent went utterly still. Billy turned slowly, his head swiveling towards the spot where I had been seated moments before. I was gone. All that remained was a folded scarf on the chair. Blue, with delicate silver threading. Gently placed. Deliberately left. Chelsea turned on her heel and stormed off, her expensive bouquet forgotten on the grass, her bridesmaids scurrying after her, their heels clicking on the gravel, whispers trailing like smoke. Billy stood alone, abandoned, in front of the floral arch where they had just exchanged their vows. The photographer quietly lowered his camera, sensing the end of a very different kind of shot. One of the guests, a distant cousin who had known me from way back, stepped forward and placed a hand on Billy's slumped shoulder. "Son," the man said softly, his voice thick with sorrow and knowing, "that woman walked through hell to raise you. You should have let her sit in the front row." Billy couldn't speak. He just stood there, the crumpled envelope in one hand, his entire wedding day, his entire future, as he'd envisioned it, unraveling in the other. Marilyn stood in the distance, watching, a quiet witness to the unraveling. I had already driven home, and now sat by my window, sipping warm chamomile tea. I didn't need to see it to know it happened. I didn't need to hear it to feel it. I had waited for this moment. Then it came. Quiet. Precise. Clean. I looked out at the street light flickering on across the road, casting its lone glow, and whispered to myself, "This is for every mother who was told she wasn't enough." And this time, the tears that slipped down my cheek weren't from sadness. They were from peace. The funny thing about beating cancer is that nobody ever expects you to win quietly. They expect the triumphant speech, the survivor photo shoot, the glossy smile next to the doctor in the hallway, announcing your miraculous victory to the world. But when I got the call from my oncologist, when she told me the treatment had worked, that the scans were gloriously clear, I didn't cry. I didn't even smile. I just looked out the window, folded the news inside me like a precious note only I needed to read, and simply said, "Good." Because I had already made peace with dying. But now, I had something better, peace while living. I didn't tell Billy. He didn't deserve to know. I let him believe I had passed. Let Marilyn follow my instructions. Let the obituary run in the local paper, a quiet announcement of my supposed demise. Let the silence do its work. The world mourned me, the kind, quiet old woman, but I was very much alive. I left Charleston 2 days after the wedding, slipping away quietly. No dramatic goodbyes, no suitcase full of regrets. Just a small leather handbag, my passport, and one final letter left on Marilyn's kitchen counter that read, "It's done. Thank you." I now live in a coastal village in southern Spain. The air smells like oranges and sea salt. My neighbors don't know my name. I tell them to call me Ellie. I rent a charming little home with vibrant blue shutters and an old, sun-drenched courtyard where I grow fresh mint and fragrant basil. In the afternoons, I sit there, a cup of herbal tea in hand, a soft wool blanket across my knees, watching the world go by. I still have some money, not a fortune, mind you, most of that I gave away, as planned. But enough. Enough to buy my time. Enough to keep the lights on. Enough to start fresh in a place where no one sees me as a ghost or a burden. Back home, I hear they still talk about me. Marilyn told me the Hope Haven Foundation renamed their main building Hayes Hall. Donations poured in after my story, or at least a version of it, went viral. Someone had shared a photo of me, a rare one, standing with the other women at the shelter, the caption simply stating, "She gave us everything her family threw away." I never asked for that attention, but I'm glad it happened. Women from all corners of the internet started writing tributes, sharing their own raw, powerful stories. Hashtag after hashtag bloomed like wildflowers across social media. Hashtag Ellie deserved better. Hashtag Granny with the last word. Hashtag let her smile once more. They thought I was gone. And I let them, because for Billy, losing me was the best thing that ever happened to him. It was the only thing that ever truly taught him anything. He tried to sue, from what I hear. Tried to get Marilyn to unseal the will, but it was ironclad, airtight, not a single crack for daylight to penetrate. She gave him my final letter, the one I signed with a steady hand and a clean heart. "I loved you, and you spit on it. I gave you everything, and you asked for more. I would have given you the world, but you said I was too ugly to be in it. So now I live in one where you don't exist. Goodbye, Mom." He never got to say sorry. He never got closure. And I'm not sorry for that. I gave him a quiet stage to be cruel on. I sat still and let him show his whole heart to the world. And when he did, the world saw it for what it truly was, rotten, ungrateful, empty. I didn't die angry. I lived with purpose. I sip my tea now, while the setting sun paints the ancient stones around me in hues of gold. I buy fresh bread in the mornings, the aroma a simple pleasure. I walk to the market on Tuesdays, my worn cane tapping a gentle rhythm. The kind lady at the flower stall knows I like white lilies. I tell people I had a husband once. I don't tell them about the sun. Sometimes, I think about that scarf I left behind. Blue, with silver threading, folded neatly on the third-row chair. I hope someone picked it up. I hope someone wondered why it was placed so gently, so deliberately. Let them wonder. Let them write poems about the woman who vanished. Let them teach my name in fundraising halls and foundation grants. Because the truth is, I'm not resting in peace. I'm living in it. And Billy? He gets to live in silence. That's the only inheritance I left him.